G'day there. Welcome to the Alpha Wave Trader week ahead. Today I thought I'd just change tack a little bit and have a look at the East Coast gas shortage and give you a few ideas that you could then go and research yourself or keep an eye on. Obviously, it's a slowly unfolding saga, and at the moment the predictions are that there's not going to be a problem too much until 2023. But that can change quite dramatically and quite quickly based on the forecasts on the different areas of demand in the gas market. So I just want to bring your attention to a few little companies that are working on different projects that can get up and running over the next year or two that could be pretty highly leveraged to any problems on the East Coast gas market, and also in areas where things are possibly going to be opened up, where different areas of the market will gain access to the East Coast gas market. For example, the Northern Territory, where you have the Beetaloo and Macarthur Basin, where in the Beetaloo Basin they're saying there could be enough gas for 200 years of supply for Australia. So a whole new area. And we just had the Northern Gas Pipeline open up at the start of this year, which joins Tennant Creek to Mount Isa. Now that's quite a small pipeline, but there's plans to increase the size of that pipeline dramatically and also extend it possibly to the Wallumbilla gas hub, which is quite big news. Would open up possibly the Galilee Basin, but also the exploration that's going to go on in that Beetaloo and Macarthur Basin could really ramp up. And there's some little companies with large holdings of land in that area that could benefit, and that some big corporates could be willing to sort of farm in on the land they have there. So it's just some interesting stories, I guess, to keep your eye on. So one of them, and all of this is not a recommendation to go out and buy the stock today. It's just to give you an insight into what's out there, so you can do your own research. So Armour Energy is a small company that's just had a successful corporate bond issue just a few weeks ago. You'll see on this daily chart here, prices selling off from 15 cents down to 7, and then they've had this successful corporate bond offering, so they've got some money in the door and investors willing to stump up the cash, and you can see prices really rocketing, but then just recently selling back off and turning back up in the last few days. Now, why this is interesting, they have quite a large land holding in the Macarthur Basin in the Northern Territory. They've also got a gas project called the Kinkora gas project on the Roma Shelf in the Surat Basin, which is producing and expected to increase production. And they've got quite a lot of uncontracted gas. So they've got the big upside potential from being exposed to the Northern Territory exploration that will probably get going shortly in the next year or two. And they've also got cash flow positive producing asset at the moment that they're looking to expand. So looking at the sort of technical side very quickly. Now this is a 6 monthly chart. I like to use the very long-term charts to get a good overall sense of what's going on. Obviously, 2012 to 2015 was pretty terrible. We actually do have a 6 monthly buy pivot, which happened back in 2015. And since then, it's been hard work, but you'll see that there's been good support coming in around the buy zone of that buy pivot. And this is where I really do look for good opportunities. If we just analyze all the price action that's happened since 2015, you can actually see it all in reference to that big buy pivot that occurred back in 2015. So we've got this sell-off back into that buy zone, which is at 75 to 87% retracement. That's where I look for my opportunities after we've had the pivot in place. and you can see buying in that zone has been a pretty good thing, and resistance has come in around that midpoint of that range again and again over the last few years. We recently had a good spike. There's been buying coming in, and again, expect to see good resistance in the sell zone of that buy pivot candle, and prices got rejected, and we've seen fall back into that buy zone again. And this is when we've now seen that corporate bond issue and prices really bouncing. So, could be nearing the end of this long-term sideways motion. It is in the spot where I like to look for buying opportunities. And just looking at the monthly, this monthly, fairly interesting with the buy pivot here. This was last month's price action there. So we've got the buy pivot, which is when prices have closed above the high of the lowest price candle, and now prices, selling off again back into the buy zone of that candle. So drilling into that shorter time frame is giving us positive vibes, and you can see that for this whole last year that volatility really has crunched up. When that happens, you're getting closer and closer to some sort of breakout, which should see an extended move. And it's just, feels like it's building up. That Coke bottle is getting shaken up, and it's getting closer to having a good move. And I'd say from the look of this overall chart that, and the state of the East Coast gas market, that chances are a rally back towards this 15-cent high is on the cards before it has a monthly close below 7 cents. Just one to keep your eye on and do a bit of investigation on, because it's got an interesting little portfolio of assets at the moment. Empire Energy, EEG, is another one with a huge land holding in the MacArthur Basin and a little bit in the Beetaloo as well, which is interesting. They're one of the final independent groups that isn't a world major, pretty much, that has some land holding in the Beetaloo Basin. And we can see here, this is a semi-annual chart again, going back to 2009. And it's been a long, hard road. But we do have signs of life. We've got the 6 monthly buy pivot occurring there. And again, the shakeout occurs where prices go back down to the bottom of that candle, which is the area where I'm interested. Looking at this shorter term chart, I love to look at these big impulsive spikes that occur where there is some news around, and that would be Northern Territory backing off on the moratorium on fracking and exploration onshore, etc. So it's brought it back to life, and then you have the shakeout, which always occurs, and yes, it's moved right back into the buy zone of that whole wave higher. We've got the monthly buy pivot has occurred there. And now prices then also last month is that first key bar up, which is the close above the high of that buy pivot candle, which is giving you the sense of a rally starting to take shape. This is 2 cents. It's got plenty of shares on issue like these little stocks do. Very high risk sort of a stock, of course. May never get a farm in. It definitely doesn't have enough money to do the exploration it needs to on the land that it has. But if people are sniffing around and want to start looking at the opportunities up in the Northern Territory in that area, things could start to get moving for a little company like this. And at 2 cents, it's a long-term sort of cheap option on something happening. Again, do your own research and check it out. Just interesting little story potentially. there are quite a few stocks, with some stranded gas. They got lots of gas, but if a pipeline could be built to them, they'd be worth squillions. But that's a tough ask, knowing when that will all unfold. But looking at a company like Galilee Energy, you can see that it's really come alive recently with a huge move, up to 80 cents on gas discoveries and how things are looking. But again, it's stranded gas, so you've got to hope that things will work out for them. And I think it's a tough one to just buy into, but it is one to keep your eye on. And just looking at the key bars, we have the new key bar up on the quarterly chart here. Oh, sorry, this is a semi-annual chart, and we got a new semi-annual key bar there, and prices have sold off. The usual shakeout is occurring, but it's in this sort of areas where it becomes interesting. If it ends up closing below that low, we might end up having another little leg down for the shakeout, and then it'd probably be great buying if it got all the way back down to around 20 cents. But that may not occur. It's a bit early on this one, but one for the watch list. Another one that's having a move is LCK, Lee Creek Energy. This is another one where their gas resource is being proved up and is large. And here we can see on the weekly, huge volume. You can see there, moving from 10 cents up to 40 cents, retesting the old highs from 2016 and coming back off a bit, but really starting to move in big size. But again, I think a few 100 kilometres from gas pipeline, looking into options for what they need to do. I need to do a bit more research on them, but just another one for the watch list. If things can move forward with bringing their gas to market, this one could be worth a hell of a lot more than where it is now. But as always, these things take time, and you can see how often these sort of companies go through a big spike and then a lot of time shaking everyone out before the next bit of news hits. So it's very difficult to just chase them when they're very strong. But this is when I start looking for points where prices could get back to where I'd be interested in looking at them. But yep, another one for the watch list there for you. Of the smaller stocks, Real Energy Corporation is probably the one that's pretty close to actually getting their project up. They're not far from infrastructure. They've got the ability to get a pipeline to a gas facility where they can get gas processed. It's probably coming online late this year. It's fairly compelling. I've seen some valuations just on the second stage of their project to get into production around 15 cents. And then they've got plans to increase production fivefold in the next few years once they get going. And just looking technically, so we've got the quarterly buy pivot, which occurred back in early 2017. We then have the next key bar, which is there. And all of this price action I see as being in relation to that key bar. So if I just do a calculation on that quarterly bar, you can see here prices really just bouncing around within that quarterly bar. And of course, for me, it's the buy zone of that bar is the spot where I find the good opportunities, and also even testing below can happen and can provide good opportunity. But just looking interesting where it is, selling off at the moment after capital raising, and it's got some options RLEOB that are looking fairly interesting. with I think 14 cent strike price with its expiry in a year or so. So just selling off back into a zone which is interesting because their project really doesn't have too many hurdles to jump over before it'll get up and running. So another one for the watch list. Well, I think that'll do for today. I've got a few more I can run through for you, but I'm taking up too much of your time. I'll continue on this theme at a later stage, and hopefully that's thrown out a few thoughts for you that sparks your interest. And as the East Coast gas shortage increases in exposure, I think a few of these little companies could start to come alive. All right, cheers. I'll come back with more next week.